Well, there's a new VHS movie coming out called VHS Beyond, and I thought it might be interesting to look at this series and rate it, but I figured I would do something that I've never done before, and that's to break it up and rate it by the shorts instead of the movies, and see if a movie that people don't like so much can have a top rated entry. So I broke it down, and there are 31 shorts in total. And that's not including the gorgeous Vortex one that was cut from the films. And I didn't include the Veggie Chopper commercial as a separate thing like some lists did. But I also had the wraparounds as a complete segment. So there's 31 here. And I sent that list out to my patrons, and like always, they ranked the shorts with their favorite as number one, and in this case, number 31 as dead last. And then I tallied up all those scores, and I had 31 people answer the call. So that means that the best score that a short can have is 31 points. And the worst score would be a whopping 961. So there's a lot of points at stake here, and lots of shorts. So this may take a bit longer than normal, but let's take a peek here and see which of these shorts takes the top spot and which needs to be rewound and taped over.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Our dead last entry here, the bottom of the barrel, is one of the wraparounds, and it landed here with 744 points. And this was always near the bottom, but it wasn't until the final couple of rankings that it pushed its way here, and it's tape 56, the wraparound segment of the first film. This one was put in dead last only 3 times, and the best score that it got was a single 7th place vote. And I had this one pretty low myself, since this was my 26th place entry. It's one of the harder things to really get into here, because the fact is that our main characters are all pretty terrible people. So I truly do not care what happens to them, and way too much time is spent with them just being dicks before it gets to the spooky stuff. It has some good tension though, and some solid scares near the ending, but this essentially just set up like this: assholes being assholes, guy inserting videotapes, spooky stuff, end. Our number 30 here, and holy crap, do I have a lot to go through. But the number 33 was a short that was in dead last for a good portion of the time, but then was rescued at the last minute, and with 726 points, 18 less than tape 56, we have another wraparound, Vicious Circles, from VHS Viral. It was put in dead last 6 times, the most of any entry, and the best score that it got was 9th place. And I put this one in my dead last, and man, I hate this one. Look, right off the bat, the LA River is no one's spot. It's gross. No one is calling it their spot. But this is so disjointed and all over the place, and just doesn't really feel like any sort of cohesive story. And I have no clue what the point of it all is. Like, at least the first 2 wraparounds felt like they were telling a story, but this is just like a random bunch of vignettes that feel forced and dumb. They sort of try to pull it together in the ending with a story and the lore of them trying to spread the evil of the tapes to a wider audience. Like, that is interesting, but it's hard to tell that that's even what this is about. Coming in at 29th, and I'm starting to see a theme here, because it's yet another rap segment. And this one had 724 points, only 2 less than the last one, and it's Holy Hell from VHS 94. Like tape 56, this was also put into dead last 3 times, but it got a little better, higher score, since it was best score was a single 4th place vote. And I share your feelings on this one, because I had it in 30th and almost in last. And this feels like a twist on the wraparounds for the first 2, with people wandering into a setup where the tapes are, and then the segments unfolding from there. But the acting is just so rough. Like, everything just feels so unnatural and staged. And even though I like the setup of the SWAT team going in, and like all the tapes are here, it just isn't doing anything different. Like, they're just repeating that whole aspect again wholesale, with only the setting being different. And then, worst of all, suffers from the pain of characters who just explain everything at the ending very flatly, and then it doesn't even land at any sort of resolution. It just ends. We're at 28th place now, and there's still so many more to go. This may have been a may have been a bad idea. But with 206 points, dropping down another 18 points, we have our first entry here that's not a wraparound, and it's Shredding from VHS 99. This was put into dead last once, but only managed to get up to 7th place. And this is another one that I put down pretty low since it was my number 28. This is just completely crippled by the fact that every single character in this is a terrible person, and it spends way too much time just listening to them be assholes. And I'm just waiting for them to die, and it's not coming soon enough. And then everyone dies. The end. It's just not satisfying or interesting at all. And I should mention that old school horror used to throw one character in there that was so annoying you couldn't wait to see them die. But somewhere along the way, it seems like writers have decided that every character needs to be that one. And please, just stop that. Stop. Going down to number 27 here, and this was a bit bigger drop in points since we go to 677 points, almost 30 less. And it's Technogod, TKNGD, Technogod, from VHS 85. This one was put into dead last twice, with the highest number it reached being one 6th place nod. And I'm still pretty close here since this one was one that I put into 25th place. And I'm just thrown off by this one because I really feel like this should have been in the 94 or 99 movie. The whole VR vibe doesn't really fit the 85 aesthetic or theme. Like, I get that it existed, but it wasn't something that was talked about. And this whole technology is taking over everything vibe just wasn't prevalent, at least not in the underground community like this. Like the whole fear of tech was more of an old person saying, these kids today with their damn computers, or Terminator, like they're going to take us over kind of thing, as opposed to what's happening here. Plus, the story's just too simple and self referential. iPhone, get it? And then it's just like, girl puts on tech thing kills her, the end. Like, I like the whole thing about the audience all thinking it's part of the show and the ribbing of pretentious art shows, but there's not enough of that. It's just not enough to make it stand out. It's not terrible, it's just kind of a nothing. At number 26, we have our biggest drop in points yet, since it's all the way down to 628 points, nearly 50 less than Technogod. And this one is another wraparound, tape 49. This is the first entry to not get any dead last votes, and the worst score that it got was 30th place, which it got twice, with the best score received being 3 people placing it in 7th. And I put this one ever so slightly higher since I put it in 20th. And it starts out mostly feeling like a retread of the first wraparound, but I like that it tries to add a bit of lore to the tapes. And the funny thing is that this might feel like a repeat of what the first film did, but I also feel like it's doing it better and doing it right. But in the end, I couldn't really place it that high since it was just the first wraparound segment again with that same format, but with a little less annoying prick at the outset of it. But it's still not exactly giving us a sympathetic lead. Oh, and I should also point out that there are 6 VHS films, and this is the 6th entry I've spoken about, and so far, it's been 1 entry from each film, so the bottom 6 is evenly distributed. This was a squeaker for 25th place because it came down to a single point, and there were a couple of close calls here, but this had 627 points, and it's Ozzy's Dungeon from VHS 99. This is one that people were split on since it got 3 dead last votes, and the best score that it took was 1 9th place vote. And here's my first big deviance from the list, since I put this one higher up, and I had it in 13th. If this one had stayed with the first part and the whole double dare aspect of it, I think I'd like it way more. But as soon as they get to the basement, I feel like it becomes less interesting. I'm not sure what I expected from the director of Kuso, and maybe I thought it'd be more insane, and instead it just starts to feel like a Saw outtake. And I should point out that I liked this far less the first time that I saw it, and maybe watching this again after I was more familiar with the director, it all made more sense. So I guess I liked it more. I do like where it ends up going though, and the ending is delightfully weird, but I still just feel like that middle portion of it just falls flat. We have another decent drop down for the 24th spot, and it went down 40 points to 587. And we now have God of Death from VHS 85. Only one person put this as their dead last, and it got a little higher than any of the others so far since it landed 2 third-place rankings. That wasn't me, though, since I put this down in 19th place, which was a little higher than where it landed, but still on the lower side. And this one could actually work better without the monster stuff. The crumbling building after an earthquake setup is probably a scarier scenario than anything else that we're getting in this film, and it really works. But the problem here, and maybe it's due to watching these all in a row, is that I feel like we've seen this before. Like given the setup in Mexico, it almost feels like a pseudo sequel to Bonestorm, but it's not. And I guess that's where the whole familiarity thing comes into play. Like we have another Mexican area with ritualistic symbols, and in the end, it just doesn't feel like it's bringing anything original to the table. It just follows the formula that has started to appear in all of these shorts. We're cooking now and all the way down to number 23 here, and it's another good drop of 23 points. And we're at 564 with our final wraparound entry, Total Copy, the wrap from VHS 85. This is another that didn't get any dead lasts, and the worst it took was 1/30th place vote, and it did get 1/3 place vote as well. And out of all of the wraps, I liked this one the most, and I put it in 10th, and I think this is pretty solid. I just adore the setup to this, and I think that it's super creepy. Granted, I still feel like the mockumentary style doesn't quite fit in with the rest of how this is told, but it's also doing a great job of feeling real and feeling like 1985. But my biggest issue with this one is it's the damn wraparound for some reason. Like thematically, there's no reason to keep coming back to this one, and I don't understand why they had to keep breaking it up, since I feel like it killed all the narrative momentum that it builds up. Unfortunately, the last segment kills all the mood that it built up, and it just becomes another monster attacks and kills everyone sequence. But it's still very effective overall, even if it ends up just being a kind of a silly punchline. Number 22 went down another 20 points to 544. And I have to say, I was a little shocked to see this one so low. And it's Slumber Party Alien Abduction from VHS 2. It was put into dead last 4 times, the second highest number of them, but it was also put into second place twice. And I think this is a ton of fun, and I put it all the way up in 7th. And I mean, this one has a cute dog in it, so I give it extra points for that. I love that this one keeps it simple and takes advantage of the dog cam, even if that pupper has some damn good camera skills. Like it's just always managing to be looking directly at the action. And I do thank the little fella for that. And I will say that I also think that the earlier entry of this franchise did a better job of coming up with more interesting ways to do the found footage stuff and make it believable. The aliens really work in terms of looking weird, and it's strange that this was the segment that they chose to make a full-length version of, and I'm not sure if the full take was all that successful, but it was fun, and so is this. And here we go with another close call, since this was again down to 1 point, and our number 21 entry sneaking past with 543. It's Bonestorm from VHS Viral. And I have to say, for a film that's often considered the worst of the franchise, it's interesting that this is only the second time that we've seen it on the roster so far. This did get 2 dead last votes, but is also the first short to get a first place vote, but it only got that once. And this one I had in 18th place, a touch higher than it landed, and I wanted to put it higher. I really did. I really love Benson and Moorhead, so this is the one that I most want to love, and I think it's kind of cool, but it has 2 problems. One is that the main kids are just dicks and not likable at all and are hard to root for, which seems to be a problem of a number of these shorts. I was shocked at rewatching these just how many of the shorts involved really lengthy segments of douchey dudes just filming themselves being douchey dudes. Like, and the second is that this just goes on for too long. The whole ending fight scene just seems to take forever and feels repetitious, even if those skull demons are pretty damn cool looking. This is another one that ended up being a close call because our number 20 entry had 541 points, sneaking past Bonestorm by 2 points. And now we have Dante the Great, also from Viral. This one didn't get any dead last votes, and the worst score that it got was 1/30th place vote, and the best score that it got was one third place spot. This one I put pretty close to where it landed since I had it in 17th. And I guess I spoke too soon about saying that about Viral not being mentioned much because I feel like we've now covered most of the movie. And right away with this one, I like the documentary aspect as opposed to the standard found tape bit, and it gives the segment more polish, but it also feels like it doesn't fit. And then there's just too many moments in which like it seems to defy the found footage aspect, and I'm not really sure like where the camera is supposed to be or why it's being filmed. Like story wise, I really like what they're doing, and this is a cool story that almost feels like a lost episode of the Friday the 13th TV show, but it just doesn't feel right here. Like maybe as an episode of Tales from the Crypt or even Creep Show would work, but it's out of place in VHS. We're now talking about ones that have a 1 in front of them as opposed to a 2. And in 19th place, 516 points, it's Terror from VHS 94. And this segment's lowest rated segment outside of the wraparound. It has the best worst score so far since it got no dead last or 30th place spots, but it did get put into 29th once and did get a 3rd place vote. And I was into this one a bit more than most since this was in my 11th place spot. I love that this sort of talks about the notion of the line between patriotism and terrorism because it's probably a message that needs to be shouted a little louder right about now. But it's a nice metaphor with bringing in the concept of a vampire into it and does a really good job of blending the reality and the fantastic. Plus, it has a kick ass monster and something a lot of these don't, a satisfying ending. Oh, and something to say. One criticism I have of the VHS series in general is that they're very surface level and don't really dip much into satire or meaty messages, but this one actually does. And it's kind of refreshing after so many shorts of introducing characters, having a monster show up, and then just kill everyone. We're down to our number 18 now, and I feel like we've been neglecting the first film, but not anymore, since in 18th place with 502 points, we've got Tuesday the 17th. This was put into dead last one time. It was also put into first place one time, so it was fairly evenly split. And I guess I liked this one a lot less than most of you because I put this one all the way down in 27th. Maybe I'm just distracted by the presence of the guy from Poltergeist, but I think it's more than that. Like I can see what they were going for with this one, but holy crap, it just does not work. It's executed so poorly, and everything comes off so flat with some really terrible performances. And like the premise of a killer that can be seen through the video camera eye, it should be pretty cool, but it's just not. And the ending of this one just straight gives up. There's several segments here that were all pretty close because our number 17th short had 500 points, only 2 less than Tuesday the 17th. And now we have another one from the first film, and it's the sick thing that happened to Emily when she was younger. The lowest score this one had was 29th place, which it got 3 times, but it was also put into first one time. I like this one, but I guess it touched less than others because I put it in 22nd. This sort of breaks the rules of the whole thing, though, because this clearly isn't a videotape or found footage, and instead is a computer screen thing. And the format does work, even if it stands out a bit from what the series was doing. This has a great vibe and does a great job with the tension, but once again loses it at the ending, which doesn't really resolve much and instead just raises a bunch of questions about what the hell we just watched. So we've covered 15 movies now, and there's 15 after this one. So number 16 short is our dead center with 495 points, just 5 points up from the last one. And it's Gawkers from VHS 99. This also didn't get any dead last votes, but it did get 130th place nod and was also put into first one time. And oof, I cannot believe that this one got that high since I had it in 29th myself. And this was my lowest rated entry that wasn't a wraparound. And like I said, I didn't notice it before, but watching all of these in a row, I realized just how many of these shorts begin with group of young guys act like idiots for a long time before something supernatural happens. And it gets pretty tiring, especially watching all of these in a row. And by the time I got here, I was like, oh, yay, douchebags again. And I guess people are like, well, that's what boys are like, yeah? And man, that's kind of sad. And in the end, this is literally just, hey, remember that one scene from American Pie where they're spying on the webcam? Well, what if Shannon Elizabeth then turned into a Gorgon? And then it's just done so poorly and looks like crap. I'm actually kind of mad that this is as high as it is. We're at number 15 here, the bottom of the top half of this list, and with 489 points, 6 less than Gawkers. Let's check out Suicide Bid, also from 99. Once again, there's no dead lasts, but it's still got a 29th place vote, but it was also put into first place twice. Our first short on the list to get more than one first place vote. And I thought this one was pretty solid since I gave it my 8th. It's such a great setup and a throwback to classic horror tales, but I actually think that the found footage aspect is a huge detriment here. I just don't understand why they're filming most of the time, particularly when this was 99, when people were still using tapes and camcorders and were sparing with what they filmed. And besides, I really don't think that they'd film themselves doing what amounts to an actual crime. Like, those quibbles aside, though, it's solid, and the claustrophobic setting really works. But I wish there was something like a little bit more to the ending, though. Like, it felt a little predictable, and I was hoping for some sort of curveball. But the atmosphere tops my beef with that. As we go to number 14, it's another fair-sized drop with 26 points down to 463, and it's another one from VHS 85 with Dreamkill. The worst score that it got was 28th, the highest low score yet, and it was also put into first one time. And here's another one that I enjoyed way less than the consensus since I put this in 23rd. And one thing about the 80s is that it's actually pretty hard to make it look like something is from that era without looking like a parody of it. Like, if you're trying to look like the 80s, you end up looking like you're trying to look like the 80s as opposed to actually looking like it. And this does the best when it's giving us the murder footage, since it looks appropriately old. And that weird audio it puts over it is just off putting. But again, this is one that just doesn't feel like found footage. All of the acting feels like acting. The story's fine, but it just doesn't seem like something on VHS. And there's a ton of shots and angles that don't seem like they have a source, but they just have the video cam graphics placed on them anyway. Plus, the ending just is not satisfying and doesn't really give a resolution to the story outside of, well, he's dead now. I feel like if this were fleshed out more and dropped the found footage conceit, it would actually be much, much better. Unlucky number 13 now, and this was again a somewhat close call because it got 461 points, only 2 less than Dreamkill, and this one is Second Honeymoon from the original film. This did get 1 dead last ranking and didn't get any number 1 spots, but did get 2 second place nods. And hey, it's another one that I just don't match at all because this is my number 24. This has the benefit of having Joe Swanberg in it, and he's just generally enjoyable in most things. And I want to point out that this is the third sort of portion of the first film, and the hidden theme of them is basically guys trying to record women naked or just being generally creepy. Like, seriously, every guy character in the first film is a weirdo, which I mentioned carries over into the later films, but not as pervasive as the first one. But the other big plus here is that it's a very relatable situation. Most of us have been on a trip in a random hotel and worried something strange was going to happen. Like, I do hate the ending though, because for all that buildup, and then it just doesn't make any sense. Like, why kill the guy? Like, why record it? It's just a letdown. Let's check out number 12 now. And again, this was by a narrow margin since this had 458 points, 3 less than Second Honeymoon, and now we've got To Hell and Back from VHS 99. This did get put into dead last once and never got first place, but it did get a second place vote. And I had this one ever slightly higher since I had it in ninth place myself. And I really like Deadstream, and this is from the same crew and has some of the same flavor. Although there's one thing that holds it back for me, and that's Mabel. I guess people really like her character, but I found the performance to be grating and forced, and she's present a lot. And she seems to be the real deciding factor on this short, since some of the people I talk to about it love her and think that she's the best part, and others find her more annoying and intolerable. The storyline is fun though and has a nice light-hearted feel to it, even if it's not as charming as I believe that it thinks it is, but I had a good time with it. I should also point out that this is the final entry from VHS 99, so all of the shorts there have now been covered, and it has no entries that made it into the top 10. It's time for a number 11 now, and again, this was super close and once again came down to a single point. Number 11 had 457 points, sneaking past the last one, and here we have Phase 1 Clinical Trials, also from VHS 2. This never got dead last, and the worst score that got was 25th place, the highest low so far, if that makes sense. And it was given first place one time as well. And this one didn't do it for me like it did for you guys, because I put it down in 21st. I mean, I do appreciate the increase in picture quality, even if it does make it feel less real, but it's also fitting to the storyline. But a good portion of the found footage aspect is feeling like you're watching something real. And them just suddenly being like, here's an eyeball camera, softens that a bit. Once the ghost stuff starts happening, though, it's a nice enough tale, even if it doesn't do much that we haven't seen before. And ultimately, the whole camera eye bit doesn't really play into it as much as I was hoping. And what a disappointing ending, really. It's just sort of ghost attack, the end. Going into the top 10 now, and there's not much left, but we still have entries from most of the films left to go. And at number 10, with 428 points, almost 30 points lower than Phase 1, we have The Subject. This did get put into dead last one time, but it was also put into first place twice. And this is one that I had pretty much where it landed, since I put it in 11th place. And I was excited about this one because of my enjoyment of Safe Haven. So I had high hopes. And it starts off really strong. And once that big Frankenstein thing starts attacking, it kicks into high gear and the violence is well done. And it's just a pretty non-stop ride from that point on. Like, I remember being let down by this one when I first saw it, but I was a lot more on board this time around. But there's a big thing holding it back, and it's the length. This is just way too long and needs editing down dramatically. Like I think the biggest complaint about it is just how long it feels, and I agree. Although I admit that it didn't feel as long for me this time around. Moving on down to our first single-digit short, and our ninth place one dropped down another 27 points to 401, and this is Ambrosia, another from VHS 85. Once again, there was a single dead last ranking, and it never got first place, but it did get a second place nod. And I put this one in 16th place, a little lower than it landed. And finally, we see what No Wake, which we'll discuss later, was building up to. And it's a pretty cool story altogether, even if it doesn't really work on its own. Like, this is basically just that short, part two. My biggest problem with it is that it just doesn't really have a solid story outside of a sort of coda to the earlier film. Like, plus, I kind of hate that the whole thing stems from a couple of blasts from a squirt gun. Like that's all it took, and it's just weird that there's this whole bit about a killer family, and that's just sort of this other interesting thing. But then there's that supernatural aspect of the lake, and I just don't think that they mesh well. Our number 8 film didn't have as big of a drop off, since we only go down 9 points to 392, breaking that 400-point barrier. And this is The Empty Wake, another one from VHS 94, which currently has 2 entries in the top 10. So 2 of the 5 shorts are in the top 10, which is pretty solid. This didn't get voted dead last at all, but it did get put into 27th place twice and was put into first one time. And again, I put this lower than the consensus, since this landed in 14th for me. And I'm torn on this one because I do like what it's doing, and I think it builds tension quite well. But it has a couple of things going against it. First of all, the found footage aspect doesn't work well, particularly later on when things are going out of control and there's no reason for our main character to keep filming. Like, I get why the cameras are there filming the entire event, but once hell starts breaking loose, that wears thin. I really think this same story could benefit from being told without the found footage setup, but then there's that abrupt ending, which doesn't answer anything and just leaves you with questions, and not in a good mysterious way, and more in a what, that's it way. Lucky number 7, and we have another decent sized drop of around 25 points. And now we have Parallel Monsters from VHS Viral. This got no dead last votes, but it got 1/30th place vote, so almost dead last. But it was put into first place 5 times, which, spoiler alert, is a tie for the most amount that any short was put in first. And I'm pretty close here because I have this in 5th place, a little higher than when it landed. I love how this story unfolds, and the details about what's happening come at you piece by piece, and things get weirder and weirder. Like, he strolls through that doorway and things are cool and it's this interesting situation, but nothing that seems too horrific. But then those pieces start to fall into place and you start to see the differences, and it's really cool. This one's from the guy who did Time Crimes and Colossal, so it's clear that he likes this sort of high concept stuff, and I thought that this was a fine twist on the idea of science gone wrong. The only downside to this one is the ending, which is both rather abrupt and predictable. And I should say that this is also our final short from VHS Viral, and that entry is now entirely closed. Number 6 now, so close to the end here, but our number 6 entry fell almost another 20 points to 349. And it's the second part, technically first part, to Ambrosia, and it's No Wake. This has the best low score so far, since the worst ranking it got was 22nd place, and it was put into first place 1 time, so some pretty nice totals. And I put this one in 15th place, right above where I had Ambrosia, actually. And in a rarity for the series, it introduces a group of people all hanging out together and manages not to make me hate every single one of them within 3 minutes. They're actually a likable enough crew. And then there's a great sequence on the boat when the killing starts, where we only get to see this like limited area of view, and most of what we get is audio information. And it really works, but then the problem is just that this feels incomplete. Like, granted, it's meant as just the first part, and it's continued a little later on. But as viewers, we're not really aware of that. So it's just watching this on its own, like you're just left scratching your head. That aside, it's well told and effective filmmaking. And also, with this entry, all of the shorts from VHS 85 have now been covered. And that film had 2 shorts in the top 10. Although, since they're linked, does that make them count as one? Coming in at number 5 with a more modest drop in points of 9, and this one totaled out at 340. And it's another entry from VHS with A Ride in the Park. This did get a 29th place score, just one though, and it did get 1 first place ranking. And I have this close to where it is, since I had this one in 4th place. And yeah, I expected a lot out of this one because it's by Eduardo Sanchez, and I like his stuff. And based on this and Exists, he likes the idea of guys on bikes in the woods with GoPros on their helmets. And if you're gonna make a found footage franchise, it seems like a lock to put the guy who co-directed the Blair Witch Project in there. And this is a very simple and yet effective tale, and I like the whole one-shot nature of it, but it's not really doing much new outside of just telling a basic zombie tale. Like, sure, it's a concept that we've seen before, but it's done really well, and it's just lean and clean storytelling. At number 4, so close, so near the top now. This was a lot of entries here. And this next one fell 12 points to 328, and we're now looking at Storm Drain from VHS 94. The lowest score this one got was 26th place, and it also got put into first 2 times. And I'm still on track here up at the top of the list, since this is what I put into 6th place. Like, you're giving me a cool setting, and some great tension, but one of the better uses of the 1994 setting, even though the idea of wandering around in the sewers feels like a bit of a trope by this point. But I'm going to talk about it here because a big theme of the later VHS entries were setting them all in a specific time period, and I honestly think that very little of them really embraced that whole notion and leaned into it. And considering that this was really the first short of the franchise to show that, I'm glad that it actually does feel like it's set in the 90s, even if most of the other entries from this volume don't. And that glorious Ratma practical effect is awesome. I mean, look at this thing. Here we go, top three, and everything that remains is from the first two films, which I don't think is surprising. But I will say that it's kind of surprising how little of them made the top 10. But our number three short had 307 points, 21 points less than Ratma, or Storm Drain, sorry. But number three is 103198 from the first film. This had a low score of 23rd place, which it got twice, and it got put into first place twice. And I have this one right where it landed, in third place. And out of all the sections of the first film, this has given you the most likable guys. They're not being dicks. They're not screwing anyone over. They're just out to have a party and have a good time and end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's also probably my favorite reason to have a camera on the whole time, having it be a part of a nanny cam costume. Like, one thing that I appreciated more about the earlier entries is that they seem to really spend more time justifying why these were found footage and cared about the concept, and I like that. And making this one attached to the guy's chest was great. Oh, and by the way, there's a deleted scene that has a little bit of a happier ending for this one that's out there. There's two to go, and this really came down to the last day because there was one short in first place nearly the entire time. But on the last day, I got a flurry of lists and really changed the landscape and knocked it into number two. And with 261 points, we have Safe Haven from VHS 2. The worst score that it got was 26th, and it was put up into first place 4 times. Pretty solid outcome. And this was my number one, and I have to say, I was really shocked that this didn't end up in first place. And yeah, God, I love this one. It's just so good at building that tension and ramping things up. And there's this feeling of unease right from the start, and it just keeps getting stronger and stronger. Since this is from the same guy that did The Subject, and the criticism there is the pacing, well, this one is similar in that it takes a while to get going, but it's also never boring. And once things start to pop off, it's just a straight up ride that does not let go. And the one thing that this has that's missing in a lot of the entries here is a very satisfying ending. Our number one today, sneaking in there on the final day, but winning the top spot with a resounding 239 points, 22 less than Safe Haven. And all that's left is Amateur Night, the very first short of the franchise. This did actually get one dead last vote, but it was put into first place 5 times, tying Parallel Monsters, but just having better overall scores. And I put this one as my second place entry, so still pretty close to where it landed. And like I said about 103198, this one gives a nice explanation as to why this is all being filmed. Having a character wearing spy glasses that are constantly filming works really well, and you're never stuck saying, why are they still filming? Since you get it. And I love that they just keep having the succubus in the background. Like, it's a great buildup that's maybe only hurt by having too many unlikable people doing unlikable things for a while. One thing that I've already mentioned is that in a number of the shorts, especially these early ones, is like how jerky they made the people filming, and this is no exception to that. But the mood switches and things change quickly, and the action starts, and this nails that landing. And the whole finale of it is fantastic. It was so good that they made a whole ass spin-off movie that sort of ended up being kind of mid. But this short is very strong, and even though I had it in second and not first, it does deserve this number one spot. So there you have it, 31 shorts. So let's break this down for a second. Normally this is where I list all of the films and recap where they landed, but I'm going to go a step further here. If we tally up all the placements of the shorts and average them out, the worst performer today is VHS Viral, which had an average ranking of 19.5. In number 5, very close to that, was VHS 99, my personal least favorite, which had an average of 19.2. In fourth, with an average of 17.2, it was the up until recently newest entry, VHS 85. In third, with a much better and more consistent average of 14, is VHS 94. In second place, with an average of 13.8, it's the original VHS. And our top performer today, with an average of 13.2, we have VHS 2. Of course, in the comments below, let me know your favorite short and which one you didn't like, and I don't know what you would change here. Let me know that down below. And again, you can help change these rankings every single month by going to patreon.com/movietimelines and becoming a member of my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. That's pretty much it. You can participate in these rankings that we do every single month. That's $12 a year, which is like the price of a Happy Meal. And yeah, you could be a part of what we do here. Also, if you like this video, hit that like button. If you like the channel, subscribe to it and hit the bell so you get notified when new videos arrive. And then go to that Patreon page like these guys do over here because they're awesome and help support the channel. Well, thanks for watching. Come back for another one because there'll be another video very shortly. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.